Some stories stick with you, not because they're supernatural, but because they're so human they hurt. And this one's from my family, passed down like a heavy heirloom I wish I could forget. It's about a day in the 1960s at a US steel mill where my grandfather worked as an engineer and architect. He saw a lot in his years there: accidents, close calls, but nothing like what happened one ordinary afternoon. A co-worker, a man unraveling from a bitter divorce, brought his two young kids to the mill for what he called a tour. What he did next is something I still can't wrap my head around. It's a story that makes you ask, how does someone get to that point? And it's got me wondering if the place itself, the heat, the roar, the molten steel, holds on to that kind of pain. Let me take you back to that day. It was the early 60s, probably 63 or 64, in a gritty industrial town where the steel mill was the heart of everything. My grandfather was in his office, sketching blueprints for a new furnace, when he heard a commotion outside. The mill was loud hammers clanging, machinery roaring. But this was different, a kind of nervous buzz among the workers. He stepped out to see what was going on, and that's when he saw Jim, a co-worker he knew well enough to nod to in the break room. Jim was in his late 30s, quiet with a face that always looked tired. Lately, he'd been worse. Divorce papers had come through, and he'd been drinking more, talking less. That day, he showed up with his kids, a boy about 8 and a girl maybe 6. But this going on and out of place in his Sunday clothes. He stepped out to see what was going on. Grandfather thought it was odd. Kids weren't allowed in the mill. Too dangerous, with molten steel bubbling at 2,500 degrees and cranes swinging heavy loads. But security was lax back then. A guard might wave you through if he knew your face. Jim had worked there for years, so nobody batted an eye when he said he was giving his kids a tour. I can picture them now, those kids clutching their dad's hands. The boy asking questions about the blowing bats, the girl tugging at her dress, uncomfortable in the heat. Grandfather said they looked happy at first, like it was an adventure. He watched from a distance, uneasy, but not sure why. Something about Jim's eyes didn't sit right, distant, classy, like he was seeing something beyond the mill's walls. I wasn't there, but I've imagined it so many times it feels like I was. The mill was a beast, dark, smoky, with a constant rumble that shook your bones. Grandfather was back at his desk when he heard shouts, then a scream that cut through the noise like a knife. He ran toward the sound, boots pounding on the steel grate walkways, heart racing. Workers were pointing toward the pouring floor, where a massive ladle of molten steel hung suspended, glowing orange. Below it, Jim stood with his kids right at the edge of the platform. Grandfather froze, his mind screaming at him to move, but his legs felt like lead. He saw Jim lift his son first, the boy's small arms flailing, then his daughter, her scream swallowed by the mill's roar. In one fluid, unthinkable move, the aftermath was chaos. Workers shouted, some ran for help, others stood stunned. Grandfather said it happened so fast. No splash, no sound, just a hiss of steam, and then nothing. The ladle was ruined, the steel contaminated. They shut down the pour, and Grandfather overheard a foreman say they got rid of that batch, scrapped it, like that could erase what happened. He never saw the bodies, nobody did. The heat was too intense, leaving nothing but ash. The mill went quiet for the rest of the day, a rare thing, like the place itself was in shock. Grandfather didn't talk about it much after that, just the bare details to my dad, who was a kid himself then, too young to understand. What happened? Dad asked years later. Grandfather just shook his head. The town didn't know how to process it. No memorial, no crosses like you'd see for a car crash. Just whispers among workers, rumors about Jim's divorce, his drinking, the way he'd been unraveling. Some said he'd lost custody, that the pain of losing his kids pushed him over the edge. Others thought he was selfish, taking them with him out of spite. I keep wondering what those kids felt in their last moments. Confusion, fear, betrayal. Did they know what those kids felt in their last moments? Confusion, fear, betrayal? Did they know what their dad was about to do? The mill kept running, but it felt different after that. Workers said they'd hear cries at night, faint and childlike, over the hum of the furnaces. One old-timer swore he saw two small shadows near the pouring floor, standing still and gone when he blinked. Years later, I learned about Judy Kirby and Diane Schuler, women who drove the wrong way on highways, killing kids in their cars. The parallels hit hard. Parents, trusted to protect, choosing to destroy instead. It's not just the act, it's the why. What snaps in someone to make them take their own kids with them? I drove past that mill once, long after it closed. It's a rusted shell now, but I swear I felt it watching me, like the air was thick with something unnameable. I imagined those kids, their screams echoing in the steel. Grandfather's gone now, and he took most of the story with him, but it lives in me, in the questions I can't answer. Do places hold on to pain like that? Have you ever felt a spot that just feels heavy, like it's carrying a... I was only 8 when it happened, but some memories dig into you like splinters, impossible to shake. And this is the story of the year I learned. Fear isn't just for ghost stories. It's real, and it can hide in your own home. We lived in a sprawling, creaky house on the edge of a small town, the kind of place that felt alive with secrets. It was the early 2000s, and the school district was a mess, splitting my brother and me between different schools and buses. That left me as the last one out in the morning and the first one home in the afternoon. My job was simple: lock the door, turn off the lights. But one morning, something wasn't right, and what I saw in that house still haunts me. Let me take you back to that day. The house was old, with sagging floors and windows that rattled in the wind. It sat on a quiet street where the town faded into fields and woods. Mornings were hectic. Mom rushing to work, my brother catching his bus before mine. I'd do my rounds, flicking off lights, checking the back door. That morning, I noticed the basement door ajar, its light spilling into the hall. It was odd. We rarely went down there. The basement was damp, cluttered with boxes and cobwebs, the kind of place that gave you the creeps just thinking about it. I figured Mom or her boyfriend had left it open, so I reached in, switched off the light, and pulled the door shut. The click of the latch felt final, and I ran to catch my bus, the cold spring air biting my cheeks. But deep down, something nagged at me, like school dragged on. But when I got home that afternoon, the house was too quiet. I dropped my backpack by the door and froze. The basement door was open again, wide enough to show the stairs descending into darkness, and the light was back on, casting a sickly yellow glow. My stomach twisted. I was sure I'd turned it off. Maybe I'd forgotten. Kids forget things, right? I creeped toward the door, my sneakers squeaking on the hardwood. I crept toward the door, my sneakers squeaking on the hardwood, telling myself it was nothing. But when I reached the top of the stairs and looked down, my breath caught. There, near the bottom, was a figure. A tall, shadowy shape, broad like a man, standing still. It was sure I'd turned it off. Maybe I'd forgotten. Too blurry, like a smudge of ink that moved. I screamed, slammed the door, and dragged upon. I didn't stop there. I ran to my room, dove into my closet, and pulled the door shut, curling up behind a pile of clothes. The house was silent, but I kept imagining footsteps, heavy and deliberate, climbing those stairs. I stayed there until Mom got home, too scared to move, too scared to check. When she called for me, I lied, said I was doing homework. I didn't tell her or anyone about the figure. I didn't tell her or anyone about the figure. I was 8, convinced it was a ghost, and certain no one would believe me. For months I avoided the basement, making excuses to skip my morning checks. Every time I passed that door, I'd hold my breath, waiting for it to creak open. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear faint thumps from... A year later, things got worse. Mom and her boyfriend started noticing money missing. Small amounts, 20 here, 60 there, adding up to nearly 900 over months. They thought it was my brother or me at first, but we swore we hadn't touched it. One night, they decided to search the house, all of us armed with flashlights, poking into corners and closets. I was terrified, not just of what we might find, but of what I already knew was down there. We checked the basement last, and I'd been alone was down there. We checked the basement last, and that's when Mom's boyfriend found it. A small jagged hole in the exterior wall, hidden behind some old crates. It led to a crawl space, a tight, dirt-floored tunnel that connected to corners and closets. Poking into corners and closets. I was terrified not just of what we might find, but of what I already knew was done. The realization hit me like a punch. I told Mom about the figure then, my voice shaking as I described that day. She hugged me, but her face was pale, her eyes wide with the same fear I'd carried for a year. The police came, sealed the hole, and set up patrols, but they never caught anyone. We moved a few months later, leaving that house and its secrets behind. But I couldn't shake the what ifs. What if I'd gone down those stairs, unseen? But if I'd gone down those stairs, what if they'd come back while I was hiding? Neighbors told us later they'd heard noises too, scrapes in the night, a shadow moving past their windows. One swore they saw a man standing in our yard, staring at the basement. We moved a few months later, leaving that house and its secrets behind. But I couldn't shake the what ifs, unseen. That house is gone now, torn down for a new development. But I drive by sometimes, and the lot feels wrong, like the air's too thick. I still check my locks twice, and I never leave a basement door unchecked. The worst part isn't the fear of what I saw. It's knowing it was real. A person who chose to creep into our lives, treating more than just money. I need to know those kids in other stories, like Judy Kirby's or Diane Schuler's, and wonder what makes someone cross that line, whether it's despair or something darker. Have you ever felt like your home wasn't safe? Maybe you've seen something darker. Have you ever felt like your home wasn't safe? Maybe you've seen something. A shadow, a door left open, that made you question who or what was there. Judy Kirby's another story. Some memories are like scars. They fade, but they never really go away. My name's Daniel, and when I read about your experience with that shadowy figure in your childhood home, it hit me hard. It reminded me of a day when I was a kid, maybe 7 or 8, and my cousin and I came so close to a freak accident that could have ended everything. It wasn't a person lurking in our house, but the fear? That suffocating, heart-pounding dread. It's the same. Your story brought it all back. The way a normal day can turn into a nightmare in seconds. This happened in my aunt's house, a place that felt safe until it didn't. Let me take you back to that summer afternoon, to a moment that still makes me check dark corners. It was the late 90s, a sticky summer in a small town where nothing much happened. My cousin Lily and I were inseparable back then, always at my aunt's house while our parents worked. Her place was cozy, cluttered with knickknacks and old furniture, the kind of house that smelled like fresh laundry and coffee. Lily had a daybed in her room, pushed against the wall, with a gap just big enough for us to squeeze behind. We were bored that day, hyped up on popsicles and imagination, so we decided to make a secret fort. We pushed the bed tighter against the wall, creating a narrow, dark cave where we could play or nap. It was our little hideout, a place to giggle and whisper secrets. I remember crawling in first, the carpet rough under my hands. Lily right behind me, both of us laughing. At first it was fun. We lay there in the dark, whispering about school, making up stories about spies and monsters. But after maybe 10 minutes, I noticed it was getting warm. The air felt thick, like we were breathing through a blanket. Lily's giggles slowed, and I could hear her breathing harder, shallower. My chest tightened, and my head started to feel fuzzy, like I'd spun in circles too long. "It's hot," I mumbled, but my voice sounded far away. Lily didn't answer right away, and when she did, her words were slurred, like she was half asleep. Panic hit me like a wave. I tried to push the bed out, but it wouldn't budge. The carpet, that soft, plush carpet, gripped the bed's legs like glue. We were trapped, the walls closing. I don't know how long we were stuck, maybe 30 minutes, maybe less, but it felt like forever. My hands were slick with sweat as I clawed at the bed frame, my nails digging into the wood. Lily was crying now, quiet sobs that made my heart race faster. The heat was unbearable, our body heat and fear turning the space into an oven. My vision blurred, spots dancing in the dark, and I kept thinking, this is it. We're not getting out. I saw flashes of my mom's face, my aunt's the way they'd find us later, crumpled behind the bed. But then somehow, I got my shoulder against the frame and pushed with everything I had. Lily pushed too, her small hands shaking. The bed scraped forward, just an inch, then more, and cool air rushed in. We scrambled out, gasping collapse. We didn't tell anyone right away. I think we were too scared, too embarrassed, like we'd done something wrong. When my aunt got home, we just said we'd been playing hide and seek. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd dodged something bigger than a kid's mistake. How does a bed get stuck like that on carpet? It didn't make sense then, and it still doesn't. Later, I overheard my aunt talking about the house. How it had bad vibes, how things moved sometimes, like books falling off shelves or doors creaking open at night. She laughed it off, but I didn't. I started noticing things after that. Shadows in the hall that didn't match anyone's shape. A faint tapping from the walls when I was alone. Wouldn't make sense then, and it still doesn't. Later, I overheard my aunt talking about the house. Your story about the creep in your basement made me think of how close danger can be, how it can hide in places you trust. For you, it was a real person stealing through a crawl space. For me, it was a freak accident that felt like something else, something watching. I think about other stories too. Judy Kirby, Diane Schuler, that father at the steel mill. People who turned safe moments into tragedies. But what about the accidents? The near misses that feel orchestrated? Lily and I could have suffocated, and no one would have known why. We moved away a year later, and I heard the next family in that house left fast, saying it felt wrong. I still checked behind furniture, under beds, like I'm 8 again. Waiting hut at steel mill, people who turn safe moments into tragedies. But what about the accidents? The turn explained. I'm so sorry about your brother's ex-girlfriend and what she went through. That kind of terror, knowing someone was in your space, it's a violation that lingers. I hope she's found some peace, and I hope you're okay too. These stories connect us, don't they? The fear, the what ifs, the way a house can hold on to something dark. If anyone else has a story of a near miss or a moment that felt wrong, share it below. Let's talk about the things that keep us up at night.